Welcome to AP European History with Mr. Bowlby. I'm sure you're excited to be here. Today we're going to very briefly talk about Section 4 of Chapter 13 from the McKay, Hill, and Buckler text, 7th edition, European Society in the Age of the Renaissance. And what we'll be focusing on is the Northern Renaissance. What we really need to think about here is how the Northern Renaissance distinguishes itself from the Italian Renaissance. And one of the things that we talk about continually is this idea that yes, the northern Italian city-states lead the Italian Renaissance, but that does not connotate the Northern Renaissance. The Northern Renaissance happens in the Low Countries, which would consist of Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, Germany, England, France. We even see evidence of Renaissance in Spain and Portugal. And it happens at a much later period of time, probably about 150 to 175 years after the Renaissance really starts in Italy. And word gets around Europe, and students from all over gravitate towards Renaissance Italy to study the ideas, study the culture, art, architecture, all of the great advances, and they bring these ideas back to their home countries. But they put their own cultural spin on those. A paramount difference between the Northern Renaissance and the Italian Renaissance that we've been going through and going over is the idea that cultural traditions remained much more Christian. While we see evidence in the Italian Renaissance of a move towards secular ideas, as will be displayed in the examples of art and the foundations of the literature, specifically from More and Erasmus, we'll find still a very heavily Christian influenced theme. The Northern Renaissance had a program for broad social reform based on this Christianity, and that is a pillar of the Northern Renaissance. Many Northern humanists were interested in the development of an ethical way of life and a combination of these classical and Christian ideals. One thing that we see a movement toward, which will be foundations for the Reformation by people like Lefebvre, is a belief in the Bible and its use by common everyday people. And we've really been stressing that, or overstressing this idea of the influence and impact of the printing press, the influence of the use of vernacular on people, everyday common people that are now able to start to make some decisions for themselves and choose some of their beliefs. And Thomas More is one of two very paramount people, and there are many in the North, but as your text mentions, paramount people that are very influential in this Northern Renaissance and these ideas of humanism in the North. He was an English lawyer and ambassador. Okay, he worked for King Henry VIII, and as he was an ambassador, he found time to write his masterpiece in literature, if you will, Utopia, in 1516. And these ideas that he talked about were very groundbreaking at the time. We think of them today as things that have been debated and philosophized over for hundreds of years, but he really talks about the acquisition of private property and greed as a base in societal problems. And really what Utopia seeks to do is move people towards socialism. The ideal of a socialist community where everybody spends part of their time doing manual labor and part of their time doing business work or taking care of and running businesses. He surmises that this idea of private property and the institution of that is one of the great downfalls of humanity, and really it allows people to be greedy, and this is a foundation of societal problems. Francois Rabelais is a French humanist, and he creates a parody, a comical parody, which is actually considered a great masterpiece, Gargantua and Pantagruel. And he advocates through this narrative, and this was a series that he wrote, a program of educational reform and a belief that institutions, specifically the institution of education, mold individuals. He uses satire and he uses comedy to illustrate these things. Perhaps the most influential, Desiderius Erasmus. Okay, and his primary belief is the application of best humanist learning to explain the Bible. He writes many pieces of literature, perhaps the most notable, The Praise of Folly in 1509. It's a satire of worldly wisdom and a plea for Christian faith of women and children. And it really looks at how we can mold the Bible into daily life. Okay, two fundamental themes in a majority of his work: education is the means to reform, and that Christianity is an inner attitude of the heart, meaning that it's something that goes on within an individual. And here's where we get some of the individualist aspects of the Northern Renaissance that can change a person's life. It's a way of being, a way of acting, not just an institution or a building that you attend. Northern Renaissance art. Your text does not take a lot of time to talk about Northern Renaissance art, but the fact of the matter is that there are many Northern artists, artists of the Northern Renaissance, that were greatly admired by the more commonly named Italian Renaissance artists. Not only that, but many of these artists started their work before some of the greats in Italy. Roger van der Weyden, Jan van Eyck, okay, Jerome Bosch are three that are mentioned in your text. We'll get to some examples of them in a minute. They are considered artistic equals to the Italians. Van Eyck is one of the earliest to use oil-based paints in his work. And you'll notice both in Van Eyck and van der Weyden, attention to great human detail and human personality. Bosch is a little more out there. He has a distinct feeling of chaos in his paintings, reflection of confusion and anguish, oftentimes the peasantry, colorful imagery, as you'll see, and just a lot of a chaos following the kind of that time when the Middle Ages ended. And as you'll see from the quality of the work in the examples, very detailed, brilliant color, great use of realism, themes that carry over and are very common stylistically between both the Northern Renaissance artists and the Italian Renaissance artists. One thing of note is that you will find much more Christian-based art in the Northern Renaissance. You do not find nearly as much of the Greco-Roman mythological appeal in the Renaissance. So let's take a look at some of these pieces of art. Van Eyck, okay, these are the two pieces of art that are mentioned in your text. The first of which on the left is the Ghent altarpiece, and the second is Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride. You see the great attention to detail. You see the expressions on their faces. You see in the Ghent altarpiece the evidence of kind of the religious stories being told. Van der Weyden, even more clear here is that attention to detail, facial structure, emotion, and realism. And then finally Bosch, hold on to your seats. We see in the upper image the ideas that mentioned before about peasantry. The lower left, we see some religious ideals. What you can't tell there is that's Jesus carrying the cross, but there's a lot of chaos. And then the lower right-hand corner, almost a fantasy world, lots of crazy stuff going on there. These are all very good examples of Renaissance art from the North, and something that are good to take a look at. This concludes section 4 of chapter 13.